And we're live. Welcome back. Good evening, Shifties. Welcome back to Shift the Journey. I'm your host, Tito Amogus. Today, our guest is Kevin Whitlock. A little bit of backstory there. Kevin is a 21-year veteran, United States Air Force, correct?
22 and a half.
22 and a half. Damn,
Yeah.
I don't know where I got 21 from. I don't know. Anyway, 20 plus year veteran of the United States Air Force. He and I were stationed together at Robbins Air Force Base, Georgia, back in the
Yep.
day. You were there, so I was there from 99 to 09. When were you
Yep.
there?
I was there 99 to 05, and the
Oh, yeah.
last 3 years was FTD. So 3 years on the line, 3 years FTD, and then got stationed elsewhere.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So, um, I know that like people, I normally ask people, hey, where are you from? But I know you're a military brat,
Yep.
right? And because I met your parents.
Yeah.
You remember? So like we went TDY down to Melbourne, right? And
Yep.
we borrowed Sergeant, what was his name? Uh it ended with a GUE. Sprague, Sergeant Sprague's,
Sprague.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sergeant
Ed
Sprague's
Sprague.
flatbed trailer. I hooked it up
Hmm.
to my S10 and we put
Yep.
our motorcycles back there. And then so,
Yep.
like, yeah, people were like hauling down there. Oh, we get down there in a day, and you're like, oh, we can spend the night at my parents' house. And so, and your dad or stepdad, he's like retired Navy, right?
Yep.
And that was when they were in like the Jacksonville area.
Yes.
Yeah. So, where all were you? Like, where all did you grow up as being a military brat?
Well, see, was born in Pensacola, Florida. And that's where I kind of say I hail from. Lived there for about 5 years, moved to California, was there for around 11 years, three different places. Well, it was three different assignments, two different places. It was, we started off in Ridgecrest, California, then went to Long Beach, and we actually lived in San Pedro. And then we moved back to Ridgecrest, California for the third tour that he had there.
Hmm.
And then from there, he got stationed on the USS Enterprise, which was
Oh,
going out to sea right away. So
you
me
got moved.
and my mom and my brothers moved back to Florida for that year. And then once we were done there, we moved up to Virginia, where he was stationed there in Newport News area,
Right.
and ended up graduating high school there and going into the military. So
So, with your dad as a Navy guy, what made you say, "Oh, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to join the Air Force." Was that an act of rebellion, or was that something planned out?
well, it's kind of funny because it's kind of morphed into something a little bit different than maybe what we talked about way back when. But when I was thinking about joining, he sat me down and said, "Look, this is the order you go in: Air Force first, Navy second, Army third, Marines last." And what did I do? I almost joined the Marines. And anyway, so fast forward years later, I'm retired now for, I don't know, probably 6, 7 years. I'm visiting. And one day out of the blue, he just like, "Why did you ever join the Air Force?" I never could understand why. And I'm like, "Dad, you sat me down and told me this." He's like, "No, I would have never said that. I thought you would just join the Navy." And I'm like, "No, you sat me down. You said Air Force first." And and he's like, he just could not remember that discussion. So,
His
but
feelings were hurt.
there's times where I was like, I wonder what it would have been like if I joined the Navy. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like I know I'd have been out on a boat uh, half that career, and
Right.
I get seasick. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were yeah, I come from I mean it skipped a generation, but I come from a long line of like US Navy NCOs, right? And I just never thought about joining the Navy. I was like, I mean, I like to go fishing, but I don't know that I like the water that much.
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
I don't. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go Air Force. So you went right after high school?
Pretty much, I did a 1 year delayed entry. During that time frame, my parents and brothers moved down to Texas, and I didn't want to go down there and sit there where I didn't know anybody for a year. So I moved back with my grandmother while I waited to join, and basically a 1 year exactly delayed entry. The kind of funny story I always tell about that is, um, I'm sitting in MEPS in San Antonio waiting to go into Lackland, and they come out and say, "Hey, we got a problem with your paperwork. You're gonna have to stay another day. Evidently, they miscalculated your delayed entry, and your contract expired yesterday."
Oh no.
And it's like, so I had to sit there. They had to redo all the paperwork on the fly and get me in the next day. So, um,
Did you lose the did you go in with a guaranteed job?
yeah, I kept everything. It's
Oh, okay.
just because it was their bad, they fixed everything. So.
Yeah.
Went in guaranteed electronics and ended up becoming guidance control on heavy aircraft and helicopters.
GAC.
So yeah, by the time I retired, they called it
IFC?
instrument and flight controls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
So
as like impactful, I think, as like
uh,
GAC.
everybody, even to this day, still call it GAC or
Yeah.
GCS, one of the two, even though it's not been called that in shoot probably at least 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Old habits, right? Old habits
oh
die
yeah,
hard.
oh yeah.
So did you have any idea of like where you wanted to be stationed?
Actually, I wanted to stay in the Southeast, ended up getting the Northwest, and you remember this, we were both in Fairchild the same time
Oh,
period,
that's right.
but you were missiles
Yeah.
and I was aircraft maintenance. So yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I wanted the Southeast, got the Northwest. Pretty much anytime the military decided on where they wanted me, I got the complete opposite. And anytime I actually uh, put forth an effort to get where I wanted to go is the only time I got where I wanted to be.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to stay in California. There were like 10 bases in California. But yeah, but no, I got Washington State and then the rest of my career, like 17 and a half years in Mississippi and Georgia and Mississippi again. So, hey,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. It's like I got the Northwest Fairchild out of tech school. Didn't want that. I put in for a permissive PCS to get down to Robbins. Was able to get that. And then when I left there, I went up to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia
Yeah,
on a humanitarian
I remember that.
assignment, and then I had to go medical for that, and I was
Yeah,
medical records because I didn't have to go to tech school for that and everything. And
yeah,
as soon as my humanitarian was up, I was kicking and screaming, trying to get out of there, go back to aircraft maintenance. At that time, I'd been aircraft maintenance for 12 years,
yeah.
and going from that to medical,
So you
it
were
was
like, you went from like 12 years on the line to like a three level in a hospital,
yeah,
right?
and in a totally different environment, totally different
Yeah.
mentality,
Oh, yeah.
and it really messed with you because when you're used to doing things a certain way
Oh, yeah.
and your mentality being a certain way and then getting the exact opposite, it was pretty crazy. So I kicked and screamed with the career field manager to go back, and long story short, they finally agreed to me to let me go back in there. And I was like, okay, cool. Do I need to put in for Dream Sheet, anything like this? To Oh, no, no, somebody's going to call you in about a week and they'll go over all that with you. I'm like, okay, cool. And then a week later, I got an email with orders to Grand Forks, North Dakota.
Yeah.
And
Was that on your
being
dream sheet? Oh
nope,
my
nope. Like
gosh.
I said, anytime I didn't have any involvement, I got pretty much stationed wherever they wanted me. And the funny thing about that was, is being Fairchild, I knew what Grand Forks was all about because it was
Oh, yeah.
another tanker base.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, and at the time it was on the BRAC list. It had already been approved to be BRACed.
Oh, wow.
So I knew it was shutting down in 4 years. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why are you sending me to a base that's going to shut down in 4 years?
Yeah.
And anyways, go there, did my 4 years there. And the funny thing there was, is okay, we're shutting down. Assignment team's going to come in. They're going to come down. They're going to have this list of bases. You're going to basically pick your rack and stack based off that list. And they said, oh, by the way, for every rank, for every career field, there'll be at least 2 bases you can choose from. Now they said, like, if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 people of that rank, the highest time and grade would get the actual first choice. So by the time it gets down to the last person, you may only have 1 choice. But they said at the very beginning you have at least 2. And at the time, I was the only master sergeant there for our career field, so I was like,
Yeah.
sweet, I get first choice. And there was at least 2 of us, so there was going to be at least 2 bases I could pick from.
Yeah.
So assignment team comes in, they're going down the list, every career field on the slideshow. They get to us, and it's off it or off it. And I'm like,
Fail.
where's my choice? And they're like, sorry, they really need 7-level master sergeants there. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I go, it wasn't on my not to go list,
Yeah.
but it wasn't on my to go list. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm okay with it, I guess.
I
And I
went
get
there.
down there. I went down there, and then it was like all kinds of GC senior NCOs, from master
Oh, that's
sergeants all
funny.
the way up to chiefs. And I'm like,
Somebody just
why
not
am I
keeping track.
here?
Yeah.
And
Somebody's just not keeping track, I guess.
no, yeah, that was part of it. And they were saying, well, we're really low manned on tech sergeants. And I'm like, so since when's the last time a master sergeant in aircraft maintenance did actual shop work like a
Yeah.
tech sergeant? It just didn't work. That's
Yeah.
the way aircraft maintenance is. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But anyways, I got here and I'm here to this day.
Yeah.
I've been here
What year
for
was that?
2010 is
Oh,
when I got
wow.
here.
Yeah.
Well, the December of 2010. And so I've been here, about 15 years or so now.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember, I went on, TDY to Offutt for, like it was supposed to be, like, 4 days, but
mhm.
something in the jet broke, and we ended up being there for 6 days. You know who's on that trip was, Alex Johnson,
Okay.
Brad Hoff,
Yeah.
Chris Ferris was on that one,
Okay.
and, there were the base was really nice, and there were boy, it was so crazy because there were, like, rabbits everywhere,
Oh yeah. Oh
and,
yeah.
we may or may not have gotten bored and had rabbit stew that night, but anyway, it was after being there for, like, a week, I was like, "Oh, man, this is a nice place to be," and then people were like, "Oh, but, it gets cold and stuff." I was like, "This is really
Yeah.
nice."
Yeah.
You guys have that humongous the gym that used to be a hangar, right?
Yep.
I was like,
Still do.
"Wow, this is cool." The whole running track's on the inside, right? Is
Yep.
it?
And it's like I think like 2 laps is a mile, or like not quite 2 laps is a mile. I forget.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been in there. I haven't been in there since I retired. So
It's not like the one at Robbins where you're, like, running, and it's like, I'm dizzy
yeah,
because 'cause
16
I'm
laps is a
around the
mile.
gym.
Yeah.
It's like, "Have you hit a mile yet?" I have no idea. I don't know what
Yep.
lap I'm on. That was crazy.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, it's a lot less than that.
let's rewind it a little and go back
Mhm.
to Virginia. And so I know you had to leave. It was humanitarian. You had to sell your house in Georgia or put it up for rent. And it's
Y
like,
yeah, I actually sold it, yeah.
yeah, it was a
Mhm.
lot of stress, right? And then you get to Virginia. What was that like transition from the flight line to a medical facility like?
Like I said, being 11-year aircraft maintainer, it's a certain mentality, a certain way of doing business. Um, a lot more bluntness, a lot more straightforward, speaking. Um,
Yeah,
going into medical where, it's a lot more PC, a lot more of a 9 to 5 job,
yeah,
and it was a bit of a culture shock. It
yeah,
was. Um, I learned a bit from it that I took back to the maintenance world when I went back, but, um, it was hard. It was hard because, um, your supervisor expects you to be a certain way, and you're like, my entire Air Force career has been almost a complete opposite of that, a complete 180 from that type of
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah. So, and then how long were you in that position?
Well, it was only about a year and a half. So I went up there on a humanitarian. My father-in-law was sick. When he passed, probably about, I don't know, 8 months being there or so, we that's when I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. This is gonna drive me crazy if I stay in this career field. And nothing against it. It's just, it wasn't that type of atmosphere for me. I, I, I didn't really function well in that type of environment.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, got approval to go back to the GC career field, and got orders to Grand Forks.
Was it a hard transition back into it, or is it like, oh, breath of fresh air?
Breath of fresh air. For, for one, only a year and a half isn't much,
Yeah.
so you don't change a whole lot. And plus, um, when you see the grass is greener on the other side, you see all that career field change into a nice 9 to 5 job. Oh, this is going to be great. Maybe this is something that I can look at doing long term. And then you realize that that's not what you're made to be. And getting back to where I came from was I was very grateful for that
Yeah.
uh,
You're like,
ability to go back.
I need foamy earplugs. I need ear defenders, whether
Yeah.
they're around my neck or on my head. I
Well,
need grease on my face.
well, my thing is that I've always been I always like to troubleshoot. I always like to fix things. I like the analytical side of troubleshooting,
Yeah.
getting into wiring diagrams, tracing wires, figuring out what the problem is and fixing it. And that's what I thrived on. And you don't get that in the medical career field. I spent most of my time dealing with patient, your customer complaints, trying to figure
Oh,
those out and fix those. And then you have a little bit more drama between coworkers in that environment than you do in the maintainer world.
it's because the maintainers is mostly dudes.
Yeah, and it's more of a tough love type
Oh
of
yeah. Yeah.
atmosphere, whereas it was a lot more talk it out. What are your feelings like? Um, Not to go too far in depth with it, but it was a lot of like that.
Yeah. No, I
And,
can see that. Yeah, I can see that. That's
you know, so it was one of those things that it was kind of a culture shock.
yeah.
But,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, even being a like data analyst my last 5.5 years, right, after being on the flight line for 10 years, 10 and a half
mhm,
years. Um, there was still I still worked with like we were all in staff positions. We are like a bunch of maintainers in staff positions. So I still worked with maintainers. Some were like maintainers, some were like other things, but um it's pretty much it's still the same um, you know, kind of culture, but in an office, and then going
yeah,
to going to the actual like corporate world that I'm in now. Woo! I had to learn a
yep,
lot. I had to learn
yep,
a lot. Oh, you can't
yep,
say that. Oh, I can't say that. Why can't I say that? Or it's like you can't act like that. Why not?
yep.
It's
Well,
like
I mean, and it's not so much like, I mean, there's the maintainer language and everything like that, but at the same time, it's just a go do it now, get it done. Uh, that high priority type of uh, personality of car charging, I guess, is what I'm thinking of. And a lot with the corporate world, a lot with any of that, the office type of environment. It feels like they're more like, oh, slow down. We can handle this. There's no reason to get really, wrapped around the axle about it right now. So, and yeah,
it's funny.
it's crazy. But yeah,
So
I enjoy it.
so back to Offit, right? You were there.
Mhm.
Like you didn't go there willingly, but you decided to stay. What made you want to stay there?
Um, so it was several layers to that. One, we were tired of moving. We didn't really want to pick up and move again. I knew the stresses of finding a new job and a new place to live in whatever location was going to be extremely stressful to get set up. Didn't know where we wanted to go.
Mhm.
And just like Robins with J Stars, there was a pretty big civilian contractor contingent here
Oh yeah.
with L3.
Oh
And
right.
so I had been talking to them and uh, got a few contacts with them, and it was fairly easy for me to move into L3 once I retired. So those two things were the initial reasonings to just go ahead and stay. Um, then my kids, my oldest daughter, I have two grandkids now, and
That's so
yep,
crazy that.
yep. My oldest daughter has a son and a daughter, and they're pretty much rooted here. They're not moving. So my wife and I made a pact a long time ago that we wouldn't purposely move away from grandkids if we could help it.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty much locked in here as far as we can tell for I don't know, forever maybe. But
Yeah.
those are the layers to it. There's really Nebraska isn't horrible. It does get cold, but I got used to it with Grand Forks.
Hmm.
It's actually a lot more tame compared to Grand Forks.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, and I the only thing I always tell people, I go, if one of the two, there's two things I really don't like about Nebraska, and if one of the two things were to go away, I wouldn't have any problems, and that's the taxes and the wind.
No.
One of those two go away, I'm okay. But but yeah, it Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska, there's plenty of stuff to do.
Hmm.
It's a lot of stuff to do. It's fun. It's not a bad place to live. Taxes, it's to me the taxes are pretty high. And the weather is the weather. I've never liked wind to begin with, so wind's just wind. So
Yeah. But it's not like riding your motorcycle in Florida with no sleeves and getting sunburned. I remember for some reason I remember like we were riding and you're like, "Oh, let's go down this road here because there's trees all lining up and you wanted to ride in the shade and your arms were
yep,
cooked."
yep,
I remember that. It was like,
yep,
oh man, it was funny. And then of course when you get the crosswind, then you get exfoliated. That was terrible. I'm like, I
yep,
don't know how people
yep,
ride out here with no helmet. Cause dude, if I'm riding with no helmet and then like the wind starts blowing and the sand gets in your eye, what in the world?
yeah. Getting
Oh,
sandblasted.
yeah, crazy.
Yep.
So
But
like I would imagine that like going to like a defense contractor, from the military and then the defense contractor is at the base or near the base. I would imagine that a lot of your peers are uh retirees or like veterans, right?
oh yeah, sure. Um, so when I retired, I went to work for L3. L3's got several different like subsections here based off of the program you're on. And I went to the Cobra Ball program, and
Oh,
the
I
vast
remember that
majority,
one.
or pretty much everybody with them, are either a veteran or a retired veteran.
Hmm.
So I don't think, really, to be honest, I don't think really anybody isn't one of the two.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, went to work for them for uh, about 4.5 years or so,
Hmm.
and enjoyed every minute of it. A lot of travel though. It was fun, but at the same time, it can wear on you after a while.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, we're gone all the time when we worked on airplanes. I was
yep.
trying to remember like all the different TDYs that we were on together and like deployments. I don't even know, man. I don't know. I mean,
Well, at least the deed,
well,
back when it was Camp Andy,
but
and
oh, that's right. So
yep,
the first
you
one,
cut
like,
my hair. Remember that
no,
story?
that was so bad. I'm so sorry. It was terrible. I had
Yeah,
more confidence than I had skill back then.
yeah.
And so
So
obviously I cut my hair every week now,
yeah,
but it's different. Yeah.
let's give this some context for the audience, though. We get to Camp Andy, which is now the deed, and when we get there, it was like only what, a month old. It
Yeah.
hadn't been stood up
Yeah.
very long. This is right after nine
Right
eleven,
after 9/11. That's right. Yeah.
and they AFES didn't have a barber at
Mm.
all. And in like the first month, we're almost a month we're there, everybody was just, they didn't have any clippers or nothing. There's
Yeah.
nobody cut your hair. So everybody's hair is getting pretty long. And then the base commander comes out and says everybody will get a haircut by whatever date. And they said, if you don't know somebody with clippers, you better go find one. So I go get a haircut from you. And yeah,
It was
so
terrible. I gave you like the 1940s German soldier haircut. It was
uh,
awful.
no,
It was
and
terrible.
there was somebody, I forget who it was, who was like, "Here, come over here. Let me touch it up for you."
Yeah, somebody's like, "Why you let him do you like that?" And I was
Yep,
like, "Man, I was trying." So
yep,
that was yeah, I had never cut anybody's hair other than my own, and I thought, yeah, I
yeah.
could do
Well,
it. Because
you warned me.
I used to
You
fade myself, you know?
yeah. Well, you warned me, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it was
I
your
got
own
into it
fault,
on my
right?
own free will. So
Yeah, no, man, those are the days. I remember, we, like, work nights, and
mhm,
when the planes were in the air, we would play cards all night,
yep,
and this was my, like, first experience in the Middle East, and I did not know that it could be humid. Do you remember
mm,
playing cards and then, like, you start out with a brand new deck at the beginning of the shift, and the end of the shift, the deck was, like, this big because it's all
yep,
swollen with moisture. That was
yep.
crazy. Do
Well,
you remember
going, yeah,
do you
I
remember the
remember
game
that.
that we played that I taught you?
Pasoilos,
That's right!
Pasoilos.
Posoidos, that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
I tried to teach it to people when I do play again, but I don't play cards that often. But I always say, "Hey, let's play this Pasoidos games." Or what is that? And I said, "Oh, it's Filipino poker." They're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Well, let's try to learn together."
Yeah. Oh, you guys, I remember you and Drew tried to set me up. I was like, "Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom real quick," and I come back,
Oh
and, like,
yeah,
you gave me all the low cards, but I had, like, "Oh, 4 of a kind, 4 of a kind," and I won, and you guys look at each other like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "Yeah, you tried to set me up."
yeah, I remember that.
Oh my
There was a
gosh.
lot of that going on, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that was a crazy time, man. I
that was
remember.
that was one of my funner deployments for sure,
Yeah.
because
Well, I
there
mean,
was a
it was
lot
like
going
the
on.
yeah, it was like the Wild West too, because there was hardly any organization like
Mhm.
from like leadership, and like everybody was just getting there. We're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. We're just like hanging out, people walking around like with the blouse off and no hat, and it's like,
Yep.
you know, yeah, do what you want, and then the organization came. I remember toward the end, I was like, "Oh my gosh," it coming down hard.
What's crazy is like a lot of the people that know the deed of today, not many of them experience Camp Andy. And Camp Andy, I try to explain it to people, and I
Tent
don't think they could
City.
really, I don't think they could really visualize what it was like. I mean, the only ramp you had was essentially what is now the mobility ramp,
Yeah.
and
It
and
was the
all
Emir's
you
private
had
ramp.
was, yeah, and that was it. There was nothing else. Now you got this huge tarmac over there
Yeah.
that has all these airplanes,
Yep.
and I know from talking to people recently even that it's really it's like a ghost town over there now.
Oh,
But
wow, I bet.
just the drawdown and everything, but
Yeah.
it grew really big, and it's like you just don't realize what how small it was in the very beginning,
Yeah.
you know?
That first deployment was where I learned that, C-130s can go in reverse. I didn't
Oh yeah.
know, right? And, like, they came in, I was like, "Oh, cool, C-130." I've never been that close to one, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm checking it out, and then, like, I see the propellers do this, and then all of a sudden they start backing up and flinging rocks, and I'm like, "Ah!" It was so bad, and, like, they like knocked out the windows in that little guard shack there. We
Yep.
called the Amir's Palace. You remember that?
Yep.
Knocked it all out. Yeah.
And they were mad too.
Yeah. Yep. You know, I don't know where it is. I have a picture around here somewhere with you and me and the lav cart.
I got to see that one because I don't think I remember that one.
The manhole. The lab trucks were broken. You remember that?
Yeah.
And so then we had to dump the labs, and
Wasn't
all
it
we
you
had
and-
was
Weren't you and I doing that in Vegas on a red flag too?
maybe I don't
Yeah,
know,
I
man.
guess I remember having a fiasco with the lav truck in Vegas as well, trying to find a place to dump.
Yeah, we drove all the way to the other side of the.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was in the deed. I was
Yeah,
all the
and
way
that
on
was-
the other side of the base, and by the time
Yeah.
we got back, it was like shift change. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" You know,
Yep, I do
we were
remember
gone
that
for like
now.
3
Wow.
hours. We've gone for
I-
like 3 hours. The bobtail can only go like 15 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't.
Well,
know where we were going.
from what I remember, we were just searching for a place. Like nobody really told us where to
Right.
go,
And that
and
was
we're
the
just
thing
driving
about
around, and we're like, "Where are we gonna do this?"
yeah,
You
and
know?
that was the thing about like lack of organization. There was like nobody knew where
Yeah.
anything was or whatever. And then like you know, the BX was like I was like a tent or something, and there was like stuff in there that like
Yep.
nobody would buy. It's like, where is this stuff even from?
Yep.
This is the
And you-
first time
and
I
you
ever had
and you had the
ketchup flavored
pogs.
chips.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
that too. We got the
Yeah.
pogs, ketchup
There was
flavored chips.
Cash. There wasn't enough cash in the base economy there, so I was like, "Oh, I got a pog for $5, right?"
Yep.
That's so funny, man.
Completely worthless when you get back home.
Yeah. So, like
But-
that last time I saw you over there, when I remember, like we were like talking via email back then.
Yeah.
It's like who talks via email now? But like we're talking, you know, over email, and you said you were going to be there. And so, where were you stationed at that time? Were you already at Offutt or no?
No, that was Grand Forks.
Grand Forks, okay.
So yeah.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
But yeah, I remember that, and it was. I think you said 2008. That sounds about right. It would have been 07, 08 time frame.
yeah. Because I was there like that the first time with you in 01, and then I didn't go again for a long time. I went into QA for like 5 years, and then I went in 07, 08, and twice in 09. And I could not remember when you were on that one.
I think I went twice for Grand Forks when I got up there from
Mhm.
like 06 to 09. And I want to say it was the second trip I was on. So it would have been probably around maybe 08. So
Yeah. Huh. So are you what is like the career field like now? Like I know, you know, when we're in the Air Force, like you have definite steps to get, you know, ranked higher or like skills wise, you know, getting better. What is that like as a defense contractor?
well, I mean, they just rely heavily on your military experience.
Mhm.
I mean, there's learning to do with any job unless you have like a direct translation or transition over to a contractor that's working the same exact thing you're doing. So,
Mhm.
like for Cobra Ball, they classified it as avionics, back end avionics,
Mhm.
but really it was to me it was more IT than it
Oh.
was avionics. I mean, the closest I came to avionics in that job was dealing with INUs, inertial navigation
Yeah.
units, and they needed that for positioning of the cameras and everything.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was all Linux OS, you know, and that's all. That's what ran everything.
Was it
So
like JSTARS, huh?
yeah, and so I had to learn that, and I enjoyed it. Like I said, I have a big affection and passion for the Cobra Ball program. I didn't think much of it too much when I was in the military,
Mhm.
but actually being a part of it that deep with being the contractor, because that's another thing with the Cobra Ball. The back end systems are 100% contractor. There's
Oh.
not any Air Force that works those systems. So
Yeah.
you are the maintainer.
Yeah.
And then you're on the road with a really small group of people all the time. So you grow a really tight knit camaraderie.
Hmm.
And like I said, I really love those guys to death, but being on the road 50% of the year, it wears on you. You don't even realize it too much until you pull yourself out of it. But there's not a day that doesn't go by that I think about, oh, I wonder what the Cobra Ball guys are doing right now. I wonder if they're in Kadena right now. I wonder what the weather's like there.
Yeah.
Always thinking about it, but at the same time, kind of realizing that that's part of the past right now.
Yeah. So Cobra
But
Ball is isn't that a modified tanker? Like
it's
tankers?
an RC 135,
Yeah.
but it's an S model versus a uh, a VRW model, which is the actual rivet joint. It looks like a rivet joint for the most part. The way you can tell the difference is for one, the distinctive black wing,
The
and
one black
then there's
wing, right?
yep,
Yeah.
yep, and then there's three windows just after the cargo doors that are different. That's not on an RJ. So
Interesting.
so those are the two main ones. Obviously, the black wing is going to stand out like a sore thumb.
Oh yeah.
I do remember the first time I ever saw a Cobra Ball was in Kadena with
Mm,
J Stars on my first trip to my first main deployment,
yeah.
and this Blackwing jet pulls up in the revetment right next to us,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "What the heck is this Black Wing all about?"
Yeah.
And I never really put much thought into it or anything. Just thought it was weird, and then like 2 days later, they were gone, and didn't know anything about it until I came here.
Yeah.
And knowing the program now, that's their MO is they come in, get what they need to get, and move on.
Taking
Um,
pictures, right?
yep,
And the black
yep,
wing is to cut down on the glare, right?
yeah, but it's no longer really needed. It's more of a legacy thing now.
Oh, okay.
The
So
technology has gotten a lot better with it.
yeah, I remember. So like when I first got into aircraft maintenance, right? I retrained for missiles in like '98, and when I first got into the field, my career field was C3 nav. It wasn't com nav. It was
Yep,
command control communications navigation systems. And our jets were all the specialty aircraft: AB Triple C, J Stars, AWACS, RJ, and then there's like Cobra Ball, Cobra Eye. And I'm like,
yep,
I don't know what these things are, but so I remember the name, but when you said Black Wing, I was like, oh, I remember that.
yep. Yeah, so like for the RC 135 world, you got the main rivet joint, that's the majority of them, and then you
Yeah.
got the Cobra Ball and the Combat Scent, and then you
Oh,
technically it's not a RC 135, it's a WC 135, but they have the WC 135, which is basically it's got several nicknames. Sniffer's the one that most people in the aircraft industry maintenance guys know about. But basically, it
is that the one with the nose,
takes
the big nose?
samples. No, it takes
Oh,
samples of the atmosphere for nuclear radiation. So
oh, wow.
it did play a big part when Fukushima happened
Yeah.
a long time ago. They were out for like 6 months taking daily samples to
Wow.
see what the danger was from the fallout and everything. So
Yeah.
um,
That's
uh,
interesting.
it's a mission that you don't really think about too much.
Hmm.
And they did have the open skies here until they retired a few years ago.
U4B?
So no, that's the OC
Oh.
135.
Oh, that's right. Man, I
So
forget.
if you want to
Oh, open
transition into
skies. I
that,
remember that. Yeah.
I'm in the U4B right now with Boeing.
Okay.
So basically how I got here was 4.5 years with L3. Um, there was some corporation changes where they changed some of the policies for traveling, and basically the incentive to go on the road was no longer there, and they don't pay you otherwise for that road time.
Mhm.
So I stayed around hoping that they would make changes, and they didn't. And I started looking for another job, and I knew some people over in the E4B program, talked to them. They told me about this job and applied and got this job. And I've been with Boeing now for just over 4 years and um, working the E4B program. Whereas I was doing back end avionics, that was more IT work. I'm back to more straight up front end avionics type of work.
Okay. Yeah.
I am my duty title is a engineering analyst, where I'm not technically an FSR, but I'll play one from time to time with the actual FSRs. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm more into the background, dealing with sustainment
Okay.
and all that, and then providing system knowledge and theory and everything when it comes to avionics systems.
Yeah.
But um, but yeah.
Cool. And so I got one last question for you. So
Mhm.
like a lot of the people that I talk to, um, well, a lot of the veterans, maybe not a lot of the veterans. How do I frame this? So maybe half the veterans went into something that they were like completely familiar with, and like the other half like went into like we went into all kinds of stuff that like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
um if there's a if you, like thinking back, if there's something that you experienced during your transition from military to civilian that like you could give a piece of advice on, what would that be?
Oh, so going into the transition and the comfort level and everything, I'd say I want to say 100% is the reason why I'm where I'm at. I enjoyed what I was doing anyways,
Hmm.
but it was a comfort factor knowing that I know how to work around aircraft. I know how to do this type of job. Um, and it was easy of transition. It made it easy to
Yeah.
transition. I think also working alongside active duty military eases the transition as well because you don't. It's not like you're not cutting off cold turkey and going to something completely different where people don't understand you or understand your mentality. So that made it a lot easier for me to transition. Um, I've known other people that have done the complete opposite and everything, and I've watched a lot of them that retired about the same time I do, and they're on their 3rd or 4th job,
Yeah.
and, to be honest, I'd probably still be with the Cobra Ball if they didn't mess with their uh, travel, incentives,
Yeah.
because I wasn't really thinking past that, um, but, uh, it it was, um it can be very difficult,
Mhm.
um, uh I don't know if this is really answering the question too much, but like, um, I do feel even though I had that ease of transition, there came a point in time where it's like, you lose that, sense of purpose. I mean,
Oh
it sounds
wow.
really weird and corny, but I was sitting there, a few years ago just going, "What am I doing? Where am I going?" I don't I'm just kinda doing things, you know? I enjoy
Yeah.
doing it, but I'm just kinda doing things. And, you know, just kinda, like, struggle with that mental struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, I never thought it would be that way, but it happens and it can be difficult, to figure those things out.
So how
Um,
did you overcome that?
well, you know, focusing my interest in other things, not having military as your life anymore, and you just have a job.
Hmm.
Um, in my downtime, I started a YouTube channel for a while. I still have it up and running, but I haven't really done anything in a while. Where one of my big hobbies is pool billiards, and we played a bit out on the road and everything. But I got into doing like equipment reviews for uh, for different items and stuff, and that was a passion for a while. And then I, moved on from that, got busy doing other things. When I moved over to Boeing, and this is the thing, to talk about God a little bit and everything. Everything happens for a reason. So I
Hmm.
start that YouTube channel, get into video editing, all this other stuff. was really into it, enjoyed it. And when I moved on, the church I was going to, it was going through COVID at the time. They were trying to do online video recordings of the sermons and things. And the individuals doing it, they were trying their best, but I mean, they're using like home camcorders. It looks like a
Yeah.
home movie. And I said, hey, look, I'm no longer traveling. I have all this equipment. I've self-taught on a lot of this stuff. Why don't I take this over for you? And, it's almost like God was preparing me for that.
Hmm.
So I started getting more heavily involved with church after that and everything. And still am quite a bit more so than I was back then, but
Yeah.
that preoccupies you a little bit and helps you kind of, it does help you overcome those things and transition when you find other purpose.
Yeah.
And then about, it's 2 years ago, but really realistically about a year and a half ago, I started my own side business, getting into custom t-shirt making, apparel, and stuff like that.
Cool.
And again, another interest, kind of, see where it goes and everything. And been working a lot on that, and just that's, I don't know. I guess overcoming things has been, I guess my story is finding something else that gives you meaning, or finding something else that keeps your interest
Yeah.
to keep moving on.
Yeah.
Um,
I was definitely
you
gonna
know,
say that because like, being like mission driven for the majority of your adult life, right? And then you get out and then it's like, oh, what's the mission? I gotta make
yep,
up my own, right? There's like a lot of ways that could go, right? And but for me, I felt like if I could give myself tangible goals, whether it's like learning something new or like learning something in my new field, then things that are attainable, then it's like, oh, okay, that's my mission. But yeah, like I think one of the biggest realizations for me was like I was on terminal leave and I was still like had um appointments and stuff on base, and I would drop in at the office and they're like, what are you doing here? And it's like, I don't know. They're like, don't come back here. I don't want to see
yep,
you until you're standing on the stage, getting your commissary pin, right? Getting retired. And
hmm,
and I'm like, and so then it felt like oh man, it's so weird not being a part of something anymore. I
yeah,
don't know, it leaves a lot of room for like self-reflection. It's like, oh, what am I doing with my life? What am I gonna do with my life? And like being cut off from the life that you knew for 2 decades, right? That's a
yep,
tough thing. It really is a
yep,
tough thing to overcome. So yeah, finding new passions, that's a good way to do it. Getting
yep.
involved in your community, getting involved in your church, and finding your passions in those, and setting up realistic career goals for yourself also,
Yep. All
if you're
those all
still
those
working.
really, really help. And uh I inadvertently fell into that. It was just one of those things that I needed something else to do. And it started as benign as just, you know, another hobby, another interest to, all right, this is giving me purpose,
Yeah,
and just keeps you going, I guess.
yeah,
But yeah, setting goals, finding new hobbies, those are very real ways to overcome those things.
yeah.
And what's funny is I say I struggle with this and everything, but I also said I had that easy transition because I still stay with the military and I'm still around it.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine if I did that cold turkey cutoff like some people did and just went to work somewhere else. If I
Yeah.
if I had this period in my life where I struggled like I did, but still having some form of the previous life there,
Mhm.
um, I don't know. I don't know if it would have been any worse or not.
It was tough.
Um,
I'll tell you, it
y-
was tough.
yeah. And I've talked to a few people that they definitely reciprocate what you say. You know, they have that same struggle.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've seen several people that retired around the same time I did. They're on their third and fourth job just because they're just trying to find that something that,
Yeah.
in my opinion, is giving them meaning. You
Yeah.
know.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a guy on here. He was my command chief when I was at Second Air Force at Keesler, and he was saying that he's like he sat down. It was like been a couple weeks after he had retired, and he sat down, and then he just realized that like that whole chapter of his life was over. Like I don't know, what was it, like 27? I don't know, something. He was a chief,
Yeah.
retired chief, right?
And the command chief too, so he's
And
got
yeah,
probably a little bit longer.
yeah, and he's like, and I had a good cry. You just have to, um, go through that and realize, okay, my mission is something else now,
Yep.
and come up with that.
Yep.
But man,
And you know, that's the thing is like, just, uh, one thing I wanted to do when I retired, or when I said I was going to retire way back when, was the Air Force is a part of my life, and I didn't want it to be my life.
mm,
I wanted to have something else afterwards. So I always had that mentality going through my career. So when it was time to move on, I wanted to make sure I was young enough and able enough to do those things. And
mm,
you know, I too often I saw as a young airman, you know, Chief so and so that retired, 9 months ago died,
yeah,
or a senior so and so 6 months ago, died, and it always seemed like
yeah,
within 2 years they were dead, and it's like these guys were lifers. I mean, they did it to the
yeah,
as
yeah,
far as they could possibly go till they retired,
yeah,
and I attribute it at least to some of them that you know they whatever reason medically, because none of them were suicide or anything like that. They were legitimate medical conditions,
yeah,
heart attack, whatever the case may be.
yeah,
And it's like I couldn't help but feel that it was losing that purpose or that life that they had, and they didn't know how to adjust.
yeah,
It just always felt like that to me. So I made
yeah,
a commitment to myself that I wanted to have another life after the military. Nothing against while I was in there. I absolutely loved it to death and wouldn't do anything different. But uh, I wanted it to be a chapter, not the
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good, man. That's really good. Listen, man, I really enjoyed having you on here, especially since I hadn't seen your face in like 15 plus years.
I know,
So,
right? I actually went back when I first got stationed here. I went back to Robbins, and you had already left, I'm sure. Yeah, I know you. Yeah, you did because it was early 2011,
oh yeah,
and
that's right.
I went back for Drew's retirement,
Yeah,
and that I got to see everybody again then, and really that's really the last I've really in like in face encountered anybody.
yeah,
I think some of the deployments I was on, well, I take that back. I deployed twice with RJs, and they share the same building in the deed.
yeah.
So I got to see all the JSTARS guys
Oh man,
every
yeah,
time I deployed there.
yeah.
So and then a few times in Kadena as well. So after I retired.
Yeah, one time in the deed, I remember we were sitting on the flight line, we're on a launch truck, right? And then all of a sudden we're like just chilling. Then I was like sitting on a beanbag in the back. You remember? It's like, because it's just like tools and stuff. But
Mhm.
all of a sudden somebody slams open that sliding door and he's like looking in there all aggressively. It was Rock Jameson. I was like, oh my gosh, what are you
Rock's
doing?
up here. Rock's
Yeah, I
up here.
remember that. Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a long time, but when I first got stationed here, I knew he was here because I knew he had retired down at Robbins and moved up. So I
Mhm.
knew he was working for L3, and I went hunting for him when I first got there and ran in and talked to him for a while. But last I heard, about the time I retired and went to work for L3, he had quit and took up a security guard job at Stratcom. and that's the
Wow.
last I've heard of him. I haven't
I mean, I
heard
can
anything
imagine.
about him since.
I can imagine Rock as a bouncer, but hey, whatever.
But his personality is a big teddy bear. For the
Yeah.
most part, don't make him mad.
Boy,
But
he would knock you out with that big
yeah,
old head of his.
yeah,
Anyway, that was all right.
yeah.
Okay, so it's like all kinds of stuff. But hey,
Yeah.
so anyway, I wanna end the stream here, but
Yeah.
you don't go anywhere because we're gonna talk in the studio after we get done with the stream. But
Okay.
everybody else, thanks for joining us. It was great to have my good friend on here. Next week, we're going to have another veteran, Ethan Lang. He is the head or one of the leads of the Tableau users group for veterans. So the Veterans TUG. He's got a good story too, and his moves through the corporate world very interesting. So anybody tune in next week. Otherwise, have a great week. Peace.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.